Hello and welcome everyone. I welcome you all to this class which is of chapter number 5, class 11th NCERT of economics. This chapter, as you can see on the screen, is about rural development. Ever since India became independent, or even before that, every single government has clearly stated their objective of ensuring rural development. However, even after all those decades have passed, there are still some humongous gaps in our rural development area. Specifically, the government focuses on increasing the income of the farmers. The government long ago had stated its goal of doubling the farmers' income, but unfortunately, that has not been the case. The government has also been trying to encourage farmers to get better and other alternative means of opportunities to earn money, but that also has not had the kind of impact and the output that the government would have hoped for. In this chapter, we will be focusing on what do you mean by rural development, what is it that the government is focusing on, specifically with respect to agriculture, where do we stand, what exactly are some of the government initiatives that have been taken up, are these initiatives good enough, what do we need to do, all of this will be discussed in this particular chapter. This is an extremely important part for the UPSC examination, both in the prelims as well as the mains examination. For instance, when you see the newspapers, they are filled with news such as farmer protest, farmers demanding a better version of MSP. A lot of these things are asked time and time again, and this is where you must understand the nitty-gritty of what rural development comprises. As you all know, over 2/3 of India's population still resides in the rural areas, and this is why it is so important for the government to ensure that its policies about rural India are clear-cut and they have as much data as required to get these policies on the ground. When India became independent, there were two major schools of thought about what kind of development path should we take. For example, if you read about after India's independence, there was a plan that Mahatma Gandhi had supported, and there was a version of development that Nehru had supported. Although Nehru was a well-known disciple of Gandhi, well-known follower of Gandhi, but in terms of the path that India should take for its development after independence, both of these had very contrasting ideas. Gandhi, for example, had very openly said that India resides in its villages. For Mahatma Gandhi, the development of any country can only be measured by the development of its rural areas, especially in case of India, where over 2/3 of population still resides in the villages. Nehru, on the other hand, believed in top-down approach. For Nehru, he believed in focusing on heavy industries. Most of them would be focused in the urban areas, giving enough capital and skills to the big industrialists so that they are able to ensure that all the fruits of development are then trickled down till the last stage of the society. Because Nehru was the one who was heading the government, it was the path that Nehru had suggested which was taken up by the initial governments. But that does not mean that we did not focus on agriculture. India's journey after independence was a very tough one, especially in terms of agriculture production. We did not have enough food grains. India, in fact, for a very, very long time, depended on America's program, where America used to run a program called PL-480. You might have heard about this. America had this program called PL-480 or Public Law 480. The idea was, under this program, America used to help the developing and the least developed countries, especially with food grain supply. Now, these are not the food grains of top quality. America made sure that the best quality food grains remained for their own consumers, and the leftovers that were substandard to say the least were sent off to developing countries, including India as well at that time. Now, we were not in a position to say no. We wholeheartedly accepted those food grains. Please remember, these food grains did not come to us free. America, for example, used to charge a very minute sum of money, and the policy they had was that the money they earned in against this PL-480 food grains, they used to invest that money in India itself. So the idea was that we are not taking away any capital from India, we are investing it here. The problem was that we were dependent on the US. So there were times, if you ask your grandparents, they would tell you in their generation, there were times when they would used to go to government ration shops or the PDS shops as you call them, and they would say that come back after 2 days, American ships have not come. So for example, a ship from America would come once a week, twice a week. So when the ships came, after that the food grains were available. If not, they were out of stock. This was the initial journey that India had after independence. And it became amply clear that if we have to reduce our dependence on countries such as US for something as basic as food grains, we have to work towards it. And this is where the government came up with Green Revolution. Green Revolution, which started in 1960s in India, was a series of initiatives under which the government was able to improve its food grain production quite substantially. You would have heard of people such as M.S. Swaminathan, recently awarded Bharat Ratna. You would have heard of Norman Borlaug, the international agricultural scientist. They introduced high-yielding variety of seeds, the use of fertilizers, the use of pesticides, improved the irrigation facilities. When India started Green Revolution, the biggest result was that till today, India is self-sufficient in food grain production. In fact, we export a lot of food grains today. This is the journey that we took. However, although we are self-sufficient in food grain production, it's safe to say that there still are a lot of issues that exist in our rural areas. There still are a lot of stress factors for the farmers in India, and this chapter discusses all of that. Now, if you see rural development and where do we stand, what are the key challenges that we are facing right now? Agriculture is just one part of rural development. We focus so much on agriculture when we talk about rural areas because that is the primary source of occupation, the primary source of earning. But rural development, as such, this phrase includes a lot of other things apart from agriculture as well. For example, in rural development, one big issue that we have been facing is infrastructure development. The quality of roads is not up to the mark. Although for each and every one of these problems, you might have an answer about what are the government initiatives that are running for these. For example, we have the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana for roads in the rural areas. It has had a lot of good impact, but there are still a lot of villages that you might be aware of which do not have all-weather road connectivity. Electricity is a big issue. Again, the government has an aim to ensure 100% rural electrification. The government says that 100% rural household electrification has been achieved already. However, you might see in certain parts of the country, in certain villages, people arguing that they do not have an electricity connection at their home. But yes, a lot of progress has been made in that regard. Irrigation facilities, a lot of work has been put into that, a lot of government schemes have been initiated. Improvement in markets through APMCs, eNAM portal that we will discuss in this class, all of this has been done by the government. And most importantly, credit facilities means loans. It has long been a big pain point for the farmers or anyone who is doing any occupation in the rural areas, that they find it extremely tough to get credit, to get loan from the bank or from other financial institutions. This is a big issue for the government. They are trying to correct that. They are trying to make sure that this kind of a problem does not arise later on. We do have many government initiatives under which taking a loan for the farmers has become much easier. We will be discussing about some of them in this class. There is a Kisan credit card scheme that you might have heard of. There are many other initiatives that the government runs from time to time. The other problem and the focus area of the government for rural development is poverty alleviation programs. The government has launched a lot of employment schemes, MGNREGA being the most famous one, under which 100 days annually rural employment is promised for unskilled manual labor. Apart from that, there are multiple social welfare programs that are running. Social welfare programs would include a lot of things such as creating drinking water facilities, making sure that the social infrastructure like schools and hospitals, etc. are being built. Other areas include Productive resources development means focusing on improving agriculture productivity. The government is also pushing farmers towards allied activities, means something related to agriculture and not a core part of agriculture. Animal husbandry, fisheries. India has been focusing a lot on fisheries. We have been exporting a lot of seafood around the world. Then the government also focuses on these key skills to develop the rural areas in India, focusing a lot on education, on skill development, healthcare, sanitation. These have been the topmost priority for the government. And since independence, the one other area where the governments have focused on are land reforms. You would remember, ever since we became independent, there were three important land reforms that were introduced by the government. First, the land reform was abolition of the zamindars, abolition of the intermediary as you would call it. Second, it was a tenancy reforms. The tenants would have certain rights over the land. And third was a land ceiling, meaning that there is only a certain amount of land, a maximum amount that a person individually can own and not more than that. These are introduced to ensure that there is equal distribution, if not exactly equal, but at least everyone should have certain amount of land with them, unlike what the British had left us with. All these are initiatives that the government has been taking. Now, before I go ahead, I want to tell you a very important information here. Before we go ahead and see what does the government do about rural development, it's also important for you to first understand the difference between what do you mean by rural versus what do you mean by urban. You know, we often use this word in economics and in social service, social sector, governance, etc., that this is for rural area, this is for urban area, but at least you should know what is the difference between the two, right? So as per the census, when the census is conducted and when the government takes up all the details of the population, there is a specific definition of what is a rural area, what is an urban area. Now please understand, a rural area is an area where population, there are three categories, the three parameters are there, do remember these three. First, population should be less than 5,000. Second, the population density should be less than 400 people per square kilometer. And third, at least 75%, listen to this, at least 75% of male working population should be involved in agricultural activities. When these three things come together, it becomes a rural area. So these three are the parameters that decide whether an area is urban or rural. One mistake that people commit when I ask this question is they keep saying that urban area means good development, means infrastructure, etc. Nothing like that is in the definition. The definition clearly suggests these three key things that you have to remember. Now, we will start with what does the government do in rural areas. First, to ensure good credit availability, and then we'll go into marketing. Let's first start with the type of credit. Now, what do you mean by credit? Simple idea is loan. How easy or difficult is it for someone living in a rural area to get access to loan? It can be agricultural loan if you're a farmer, it can be a loan to build something else, infrastructure, let's say you're building a house, you are building some kind of storage facility, you are building some kind of infrastructure for the animals that you have, anything, all of that requires money. So you go and ask for a loan and that becomes credit. There are multiple problems with this. First, the number of banks or the number of branches in rural areas anyways are much lower. One of the reasons why government has nationalized a lot of banks in India's history, you would know, for example, very famously, in 1969, the government of India, Indira Gandhi government, nationalized 14 banks. Nationalized means these were private banks, they were taken over by the government. So government said that these 14 banks would belong to us now. 14 banks were nationalized. Then there was a second phase. It was in 1980 that 6 more banks were nationalized. Since then, the banks have not been nationalized. Since then, the banks have been consolidated. But the idea of the government doing all this, that is taking over private banks and saying that we are now the owners of the bank, the idea was that the government was not happy with how the banks were choosing their customers, especially the customers to which they would give the loan. The government thought that people in the rural areas, especially farmers, etc., do not get access to credit. So what the government said was, okay, we will take matters into our own hands. We will take over the banks and then we will decide who will get the loan and who will not get the loan. In this way, we are actually making sure that we are the decision makers. Later on, the government also introduced, as you know, something called PSL. All of you would have heard about this. PSL stands for Priority Sector Lending. Priority Sector Lending means the government tells the banks that out of all the loans that you are giving out, a certain part of it, a minimum certain part, has to go into certain areas which are priority sector. Sectors such as agriculture, affordable housing, health, etc. For example, for scheduled commercial banks, PSL norms suggest that 40% of their loans in scheduled commercial banks have to go into 8 priority sector areas, and these areas again include education, renewable energy, agriculture, etc. The government has done all of this, nationalize the banks, making sure that there are PSL norms. The government has done all of this to make sure that credit availability is made easier and simpler for the farmers. They don't have to go through a very tough process to get a loan from the bank. All this has been done by the government. Now, this is where the farmers need the money. And again, we are not just talking about a person who would need money for farming activities only. We are overall talking about the theme of rural development. So, farmer would need money for agricultural productivity to improve the output, buying of machines, tractors, or these tools that are required. Non-farming activities may also be included, building storage, etc., building a hut so that they can rest there. Inputs for farming, for example, include a lot of things that the farmers need to start the farming cycle: seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, all of that is an input. Consumption, that means farmers' own daily needs. The farmer needs to feed their own family, so their own daily needs, their daily consumption. Social functions for society, for the community, building, let's say, a place where the community can sit together, they can discuss matters, and for emergencies as well going ahead. All these are things that the farmers require credit for. All these are areas where the farmers make sure, or where the farmers need money from the banks, and thus the banks here have to come in the picture. So, what are the sources of these credit? We have been saying banks, banks, banks time and time again. But what exactly? Which banks are these? What is the structure of these banks? Let's look into that. Where does the farmer get the credit? These are the areas where the farmers get the credit from. First, the commercial banks. Commercial banks are the big banks that you usually see around you. When I say the word bank, for example, which is the first bank that comes to your mind? Most probably, whichever bank that comes to your mind, the first, it's a commercial bank. HDFC, State Bank of India, Punjab National Bank, ICICI, Axis Bank, all these big banks that you think about, all of these are commercial banks. So, they obviously are the biggest source of lending anywhere in the country, including in agriculture and in farming. Second, regional rural banks or RRBs. Now, this is very interesting. Regional rural banks or RRBs first came up in 1970s. The idea again of these banks was specially, as the name suggests, these banks were specially introduced so that there is access to credit in the rural areas. The government made a very unique structure for these banks. So, banks which are RRBs have a very unique ownership structure. The central government or the government of India owns 50% in these banks. The state government, wherever these are being set up, they own 15% of the bank, and then there is something called the sponsor bank. So, big banks like, let's say, SBI, PNB, these big banks, they are given a responsibility that you have to train and you have to support these banks in their working. because you are an expert, you have been doing this job for a long time. So this bank comes under you, you have to manage their responsibilities, you have to make sure they are doing everything right. Those are called as sponsor banks. So every regional rural bank, every RRB would have a sponsor bank on top of them to help them out with everything. That sponsor bank owns 35% in RRB. It's a very unique kind of a system. It started in 1970s. Prathama Grameen Bank was the first one to come up. It was sponsored by Syndicate Bank. Now what the government has been doing, if you look at the news stories recently, what the government has been doing with respect to RRBs is that government is trying to consolidate them. Means government thinks there are too many RRBs and we would like to consolidate them. At one point of time, the number of RRBs in India had gone beyond 190. Now they are close to 45. The government wants to trim them down even further. The government right now is working on this kind of a policy for RRBs where the government wants one state, one RRB. One state, one RRB. That is the government's aim in the long run, that in one state there should be one RRB only. Right now, that is not the case. So this is what the government's long-term aim with RRBs is. Then there are also cooperative banks. Cooperative banks, again a very unique system. As the word cooperative suggests, these have employees as members. So people here are members. Some people come together and say, okay, we will pool in our capital, let's start a bank. So they become members of the bank. Members are the customers also. So these usually give loans to each other, only to those people who are members of the bank. It's more of an internal thing that is happening, but there are obviously a lot of members. Some of them may have thousands and lakhs of members. There are urban cooperative banks and there are rural cooperative banks as well. In the rural areas, the rural cooperative banks, they are at different levels. There is state cooperative bank, there is district cooperative bank, and in the rural areas, they have something called PACS, that is Primary Agriculture Credit Societies. We will see a bit of it as we go ahead. Then there are something called land development banks. Very few, you might not have heard a lot of them. They give credit for land development specially to improve the quality of land, to make sure that that can be useful for the banks, for the land to then have agriculture development later on. And then we have a very important body called NABARD, National Bank for Agricultural and Rural Development, that is NABARD. Very, very, very important body. Came up in 1980s. The responsibility of NABARD is to give money to banks which can then in turn give money to farmers. They also have a bit of control over RRBs. They also regulate the working of the RRBs along with RBI, because their responsibility is rural and agricultural development. NABARD has been running a lot of schemes. They even suggest to the government the different types of policies that the government should have for agriculture, for farmer welfare, etc. That is how NABARD usually works. This is how different financial institutions exist and they work in the rural areas in the long run. NABARD also, as we were discussing, has a very, very important role to play here. NABARD stands for National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development. This is what they do. NABARD, for example, is focused on refinancing. Refinancing means helping the bank. So there is a bank who gives loans to customers, let's say the farmers, but who gives money to the bank? This is where NABARD comes in. See, it's a very interesting situation. In big cities, let's say commercial banks, let's say SBI, HDFC, etc. When they give loan, they have a lot of money. How? People have deposited their money in banks like ICICI, HDFC, SBI, which enables them to give out that money in the form of a loan and then earn profit from it. In the rural areas, the RRBs, the problem with them is that there is not a lot of deposit coming in. Not many people come to RRBs and deposit their money and say, okay, this is our money. So they don't have a lot of money in the form of deposit to give the loan. So they need some other source of money so that they can go ahead and give these loans. This is where NABARD plays an important role. NABARD makes sure that they have availability of credit so that they can give out loans. This is called refinancing. So they are not financing the customer directly. NABARD is financing the bank and the bank is then giving money to the end consumer. NABARD gives direct loans only to state governments or big groups. So they don't give direct lending or direct loans to the farmer, the individual farmer. As I told you, individual farmer has to go to the bank. The bank in turn will get this money from NABARD, etc. Policy formulation, they help the government, they suggest the government obviously will take the final call. But they do give some input to the government about policies in the rural areas because they are very well aware of what is happening in the rural areas, the things that are a problem for the farmer right now, what can the government do in that regard. They also monitor and evaluate government programs in the rural areas. They look into rural areas and they see what exactly are the issues right now, what can be done, how can we improve the situation. All of these things are examples of what NABARD usually does. So that is how NABARD's role has evolved, and as time passes, the government keeps on giving more responsibility to NABARD on a case-to-case basis. So you do see NABARD coming in the news time and time again. This is how the structure of cooperative banking usually looks in India. As I said, there are urban cooperative banks that you will see in the cities, and there are rural cooperative banks. In the rural cooperative bank also, there are two sections, one that provide short-term loans, another that provide long-term loans. For example, short-term loans are usually the ones where farmers are more interested in, because see, majority of India's farmers come in the definition of small and marginal farmers. Now, what are small and marginal farmers? By definition, a farmer having a land of less than 1 hectare is called a marginal farmer, and a farmer having a land holding of less than 2 hectares is called a small farmer. Please do remember this. The reason why you should remember this is most of the government schemes for farmers, like the PM-KISAN scheme, under which the government transfers 6,000 rupees annually to the farmers, most of these government schemes are specifically for small and marginal farmers. These are not for all the farmers. So most of the farmers are small and marginal, means they do not have a lot of money for long-term investment. They only have enough money for one crop cycle. Once that is complete, then they need money for the next crop cycle. So they basically have money from crop cycle to crop cycle. That is where they need a lot of help. So there is a short-term loan structure available in cooperative banks, rural areas. These are state cooperative banks that manage the entire statewide structure. Then there are district cooperative banks. Then this is something called PACS, Primary Agriculture Credit Societies, PACS. These work in the village areas at a village level. They make short-term loans available to the farmers in the village areas. Since they work in the form of societies, most of the farmers are members of PACS, so they know each other very well. So it becomes easier for them to get a loan. One big problem that farmers have with the banks is even if they go and ask for a loan, there's so much paperwork, documentation, everything is involved here that becomes very difficult for them to eventually get a loan. So this kind of a structure, the PAC structure, makes it easier for them to get a loan. So that is how it works in their favor as well. Apart from NABARD, one other very interesting and important structure that we have in the rural areas, especially in India, is self-help groups. Self-help groups is a very unique kind of a system where some people come together. It is mostly women. It's not a rule that only women can form a self-help group, anyone can, but it is mostly women that come together, pool in their resources, and they in some cases say that, okay, let's start work together. Let's say 20, 30, 50 women come in together, and the idea is, okay, let's make pickles together and then we'll sell it in the market. We'll make a profit, we'll divide the profit equally. Or they'll say, okay, let's go and make paper bags, sell it in the market, whatever money we have, we'll divide it equally. These are self-help groups. Now, there are some very, very unique and successful examples of self-help groups in India. The government also has realized that, and the government also helps a lot of these self-help groups with very favorable policies. For example, government over the years has made sure that getting a loan for the self-help groups is easier. A lot of self-help groups get loans from the government in the form of interest subvention. So there is something called interest subvention that the government offers. Please understand this. Government never offers a loan to anyone. Government is not a bank. When the government says loans will be available, that means they're telling the banks to give the loans. The government is not giving a loan directly to anyone. What the government does is, government, for example, in certain schemes, offers something called interest subvention. The idea of interest subvention is simple. The idea is that whatever interest the bank charges from you, let's say you took a loan and the bank says, I will charge 8% interest on your loan. Okay? You start paying the loan back, you start your EMIs. After a few months, the government will see how is your behavior when it comes to giving back the EMIs. If you are giving everything on time, if you are not defaulting, if there is no other problem here, then the government will say a part of your interest I will pay. The government then will say that, okay, you don't have to pay 8%, you only pay 3% interest now, 5% I will adjust, I will pay the bank. This is called interest subvention. So for self-help groups, for example, a lot of other groups as well, let's say Kisan credit card scheme as well, the government offers interest subvention scheme. Please remember and never write this, that the bank offers loan or the government offers loan. That does not happen. Governments never give loans. They offer or they create situations to push the banks to give the loan, number one. And secondly, they offer things such as interest subvention. Now, most of the self-help groups in India are created and run by women. That is not a compulsion, but that is how it is. That most of self-help groups are being run by women in India. Right now, we have about 6 crore women as a part of 54 lakh self-help groups. These are mostly in the rural areas only. This data in NCERT is up till 2019 only, so it would have increased even further. They get microcredit. Now, what are microcredit? Microcredit are usually small value loans. Think of it from the point of view of a daily wage, let's say someone who is selling something on a roadside and the bank. Let's say if you have a roadside stall, okay, you sell something, let's say you sell noodles or whatever works or whatever is sold in your city, let's say you sell that. And you want to start that setup, you go to a bank and you ask for a loan. The bank says, okay, how much loan do you want? You say, I only want 25,000-30,000 rupees of loan because that is enough. The bank would not really be interested because for them, the earning that the bank would get is mainly from the big value or the big ticket loans, number one. Secondly, the banks also have to understand, or what happens in these cases is, the banks know there will be a lot of paperwork involved, so you'll have to give a lot of paperwork. All that would mean that microcredit, etc., is not really easily available. It is not really given to the people or these daily wage workers or the farmers or the self-help groups. This is where the government pushes the banks to give them microcredit as well to the self-help groups. It encourages promotion of their savings. They get into a habit of depositing money in the banks. They get into this habit wherein they would be encouraged to save more money. And there's also financial inclusion. Because they become a part of the banking system, because they become a part of a system wherein everything is recorded and everything is documented, it leads to financial inclusion as well. All of these are characteristics of self-help group. Now, that does not mean that all the self-help groups are successful, that all the self-help groups always achieve the kind of result that they hope for. That is not what usually happens. Obviously, there are certain self-help groups that are more successful as compared to the other. There are certain self-help groups that have been able to produce much better results as compared to the others. So it's not always that every self-help group will have the same kind of an impact that they would have hoped for, the government would have hoped for. This is how the self-help groups usually work. There are regular group meetings and discussions, so every member gets involved. So it empowers everyone, people, even if they come from, let's say, uneducated backgrounds or people who come from poor backgrounds, they also do not feel that they are not being heard. Then they support savings and loan management, because once you take a loan from the banks, you have to keep everything documented, you have to keep everything in order. So that also helps them build this habit, that also helps them build a habit of loan management. And they also conduct a lot of trainings and workshops. So a lot more training, a lot more workshops are given to them. All this is how it usually works. All this is how the self-help groups have been able to have the kind of impact where they have been successful. So again, I'm telling you time and time again, it is not that all the self-help groups have been super successful. There are a few success stories which are worth noting. Some of these success stories are so important that even UPSC has asked some of their names. The most famous self-help group in India's history, for example, is a group called Kudumbashree, that is in Kerala. That was started by the Kerala government, in fact. Today it has lakhs of members and they do a lot of activities, not just about running a business, but supporting the government, supporting the members, supporting the women members in every single possible way. That is a Kudumbashree I was talking about. This was a question asked on Kudumbashree by UPSC in the prelims examination a few years back. What do? They encourage savings amongst women. When the COVID-19 crisis was ongoing, Kudumbashree played a very, very, very important role in supplying ration to the houses of the needy, in giving skills, finding jobs for the women members, etc. Kudumbashree, in fact, has been quoted by World Bank as well as a very successful example of what rural cooperation looks like and how it can help a society. So it encourages savings amongst women. They become a part of the banking system. They are encouraged by other members as well from the habits other members show. They also provide financial support to the members. So Kudumbashree has become so large now with lakhs of members that they do a lot of things now. Whoever becomes a member of Kudumbashree can undertake a lot of activities. They are trained in different areas to provide different skills to get better jobs. They are also given support for finding jobs. They are given support for a lot of other things. They get credit support as well. If some of their members, for example, require a loan from within the community, maybe others can give them a loan. There is also saving mobilization, means saving, resulting in growth of the members, and there's also a lot of impact of the community, because when you see a group which has lakhs of women members, it brings a lot more solidarity. Women know that, okay, if I need something, if there's something wrong with me, I have someone to call. I have someone who may have been through a similar situation earlier. Maybe I can take help from her. That is how it brings a social support. That is how it builds a community. This is where groups such as Kudumbashree and other self-help groups have been so important and relevant. Now, this is where these are the important ways in which the government provides credit, or the government ensures credit in the rural areas. Having said that, it is not all that simple. If it would have been that simple, then all the government initiatives would have been declared a huge hit, a huge success, which has not been the case. There are significant number of challenges in rural development as of today, especially in the area of rural credit. A lot of the government schemes have not been well targeted. They have not had the kind of results that we had hoped for. These are the big challenges. The first one, non-institutional dominance. What does it mean? In most of the small villages in India, even today, you will not find even one single bank or even one single branch. The result is, when the farmer does not have access to a bank, when they do not have access to an institution, what do they do? In almost every village, you will find an individual with a lot of money ready to give loan to the farmer. This is informal source of credit. They know that the farmer is needy right now. They require a loan because bank has denied the loan to them. They know that the farmer can't say no because their agriculture produce depends on this loan. Because of all these factors, the money lender in that case charges much more money, much more interest as compared to what should be charged. So for example, In this case, what happens? There are many money lenders, for example, that actually end up charging 3 to 4%, but not per year, per month. There are money lenders that end up charging 3 to 4% interest per month. If you convert that into an yearly interest rate, that comes out to be 36 to 48% interest. Compare that to the loans offered by the banks, which are 8 to 9%. Compare that. That is a big problem. Not just this. Let's say you take a loan from the bank and for some reason you are not able to pay it back. There are some options that are available for you. One, you might have taken crop insurance. If you are a farmer, for example, when you go to a bank, most of the banks make it mandatory that if you have to take a loan from us, first you should have crop insurance. Like the government runs a scheme called PM-KISAN Yojana, under which you have to take loan or you can take loan by giving a much lesser premium, so that when or if your crop fails, that insurance money will help you pay off the banks. In this case, that doesn't work. Most of the crop insurance companies will not recognize such non-institutional authority. Then there's a problem of poor deposit mobilization. As I said earlier, the regional rural banks is a good idea. It's a good premise that banks in the rural area, especially focusing on farmers as their credit base or as their customer base, all that is good. The problem is the banks can only give the loans when they have the money. In case of commercial banks, the big banks, they have a lot of money coming in, the people deposit their money in the account and that money is then circulated in the form of loans. But in this case, the regional rural banks case, that becomes a big problem. Because as I said earlier, very few people actually deposit money in regional rural banks, RRBs. So their deposit base is very low. There is very little, if any, deposit mobilization. So most of these banks are running in a loss. They don't have money to circulate. They then become dependent on the money coming in from NABARD or from the government itself. When the government pushes the banks, only then they can give the loan. That makes the banks dependent on other institutions, and this is why their working is not that independent. There's also a problem of formal credit expansion that has been very slow. As we discussed, a number of banks, number of branches in the rural areas has been lacking. From the bank's point of view, their argument is that they do not see any branch expansion in rural areas as very profitable for them. They think that the loans will not be of very high value. There may be loan defaults as well. That is why they do not really prefer having a branch in the rural areas. There is also high loan default. This is a problem because a lot of agricultural loan depends on whether you have the expected agricultural output or not. You took a loan expecting that your agriculture output, your harvest would be of a certain level, and thus you would be able to pay the loan off. But what if the harvest that you had, the money that you actually got, is not up to the mark? What if that happens? If that is the case, the result would be that you will not be able to pay the loan back, and that will result into a default. So this default kind of a problem also exists, and because of all of this, the situation is that expansion of credit in the rural areas has hit a roadblock. Even after so many attempts by the government, because of the scale of population that we have not been able to get the kind of result that we had hoped for. Now, there are few very interesting examples of case studies that have been quoted in NCERT. So, I wanted to share that with you. In this chapter in NCERT, they have quoted an example of TANWA, TANWA, that stands for Tamil Nadu Women in Agriculture. It is a project that Tamil Nadu saw, especially to train women in agricultural techniques. You know, that was a time when Kudumshree was started in Kerala, turned out to be hugely successful. So Tamil Nadu also thought that maybe we can also have something parallel, where we will also train our women to do better in agriculture. We will also train our women to have much better skills in agriculture. That is when TANWA came in. This is mainly to push women towards not just agriculture, but also small scale household activities. This is what called as cottage industry. In polity and directive principles, all of you read directive principles, and a part of it, one provision is about the government giving emphasis to cottage industry. Cottage industry includes all these things: mushroom activities, household stuff that you can manufacture in house, doll making, etc., small soap manufacturing, candle making, paper bag making, all of that. All this is also part of it to provide an alternate earning opportunity, for example, for the women. In fact, the government recently also has been giving a lot of push to initiatives such as, let's say, White Revolution. Government has recently launched White Revolution 2.0, under which the government wants to increase milk production even further. India anyways is the largest producer of milk in the world, because the government thinks that in these areas, women, for example, can work very well, and it can lead to improvement in the women's income quite significantly in the long run. Now, I wanted to give you certain examples of government initiatives, especially in the field of rural credit. We are focusing on credit right now. We'll focus on marketing later on. In the rural credit field, what is it that the government has done? We have already discussed about NABARD. We have already discussed about certain self-help groups like Kudumshri. Those are two of the very successful things that the government has done to ensure availability of rural credit. Apart from that also, government has been trying to improve availability of credit. One extremely successful program of the government has been the PM Yojana. So successful that it has also been recognized by the World Bank and many other international institutions as an example of what the government should do around the world, especially in developing countries. Under the PM Yojana, the government pushed the banks to open bank account of everyone. The main theme was opening up zero balance accounts as well. See, the problem with the poor population is that they were not able to open the bank account because, number one, the banks were not really interested. The reason being that the banks knew they will not be able to deposit a lot of money in the banks. And then banks are not interested in that because then their average deposit per account would be reduced. Secondly, the problem for the customer was that most of the banks require the people to maintain certain minimum deposit in their account. This is where the government came up with the zero balance account thing, that even if you have zero balance, there will be no charges deducted. On the other hand, why was it so important for the government? The idea for the government, why did they want everyone to have a bank account is, when the government, for example, says that I will give you some amount of money, like government says that I will, let's say, give 5,000 rupees in the account of the poor people, or I'll give 1,000 rupees to farmers or to women only. How does the government transfer this money? If the government says we'll pay in cash, that is where corruption starts. Historically, we have seen so much corruption in India that Rajiv Gandhi, India's Prime Minister, very famously said that when I send 1 rupees from Delhi to someone, only 15 paisa reaches them, because 85 paisa is just dissipated in the middle. What he was referring to was the huge scale corruption in the form of government subsidies. In order to correct that, the government started this initiative where the government wanted everyone to have a bank account. And the results have been spectacular. Under this scheme, over 50 crore bank accounts have opened up. Yes, not a lot of money was deposited in most of the account, but it has led to accumulation of over 2 lakh crore rupees, which is not a small sum. It is because of this, and please do connect the dots, it is because of this that today when you go to a roadside food stall, eatery, you go and buy vegetable and fruit from roadside, almost at every single place you can pay via UPI. Just a few years back, you could not even imagine leaving your house without your wallet or without some cash. Now, in most of the cases, you don't even need that as long as you have your mobile phone and there's a UPI app there. You would be able to pay someone. While your ability to pay is one part of the story, the more successful example is the ability of the receiver to receive money in his or her account directly using UPI. The reason why roadside vendors or small shopkeepers has been able to get or accept UPI payments is because they all have the bank account in the bank now that they freely operate. A lot of them opened up under the PM-KISAN Yojana. When you have a bank account, your chances of getting a loan increases many folds. Because when you go to a bank to ask for a loan, the first thing they ask is, where is your bank account? If it is in our bank, it is even better. If it is in some other bank, even then you should at least have a bank account. Apart from this, because the banks got deposits, it allowed them to give out more loans. As we discussed, the banks gave out loans from the money that had actually come into their pocket. So this is where it becomes important for them. The PM-KISAN Yojana also allowed overdraft facility. Overdraft facility simply means it's a kind of a short-term loan. Let's say your bank account has 10,000 rupees only, but for emergency purposes you require 12,000 rupees right now. Can you withdraw 12,000? Because your account only has 10,000. The banks in some cases do give you this option, that you withdraw a slightly bigger amount as compared to what you have. This is called overdraft facility. This is only possible if you have a bank account. So overdraft facilities are provided. Then accidental insurance the government was able to provide for. Accidental coverage was given because a lot of these population that opened up PM-KISAN accounts did not have any insurance of their own. That also came in as a support. And then direct benefit transfer, as I said in the very beginning. If the government wants to transfer money into your account, as the government does now, for example, the LPG subsidies, that is a subsidy for cooking gas, it is now a direct cash transfer that comes into the account. Another example, the PM-KISAN Yojana, under which small and marginal farmers are given 6,000 rupees per year by the government directly in their bank accounts. All this is possible because the government now knows that you have a bank account in so and so bank. The government can identify that and directly transfer the money. This is where it becomes important for the government for the people to have the bank account, the government then to actually have an option to transfer that money. One other interesting example that the government did, although it did not turn out to be very successful to be true, is that the government started something called Sansad Adarsh Gram Yojana. What this scheme was, in 2014, the government of India asked every member of parliament to adopt a village. In their constituency, there will be so many villages, that adopt one of the villages, make it a model village, ensure the state-of-the-art development of that village, ensure that all the basic amenities that they require are provided to them, ensure that all the problems of that village are solved. The problem with that was, there was no extra fund given for such a scheme to the MP. So it was not like MP was told that the government will give you some extra money, now go and ensure development. No. They were asked that existing government schemes are good enough, you just make sure their implementation is up to the mark. You just make sure that their implementation becomes better, you just make sure that any problem in these schemes is looked into. That is what this scheme was. Villages have to be identified by members of parliament and then develop model village. The idea was, it should be, the first model village should be completed by 2016. But as I said, when the government does not allocate resources specifically for a scheme, it is very hard for such a scheme to become successful. So it did not really become successful at that point of time. The government, in fact, then asked the MPs to adopt even more villages. MPs, in fact, were asked to develop 2 more villages by 2019, but again, as I said, not really successful. We did not see a lot of development as such. We did not see a lot of infrastructure building, but you can criticize the implementation part of it, but you have to at least give credit and realize the fact that the government did understand the need for it. The government did understand the fact that villages do need development, and who better than the member of parliament himself or herself, because if a village is developed in a better manner, they have a better chance of winning the next election. So the government chose the authority also in a good manner, but just that it did not turn out to be true. So not everything that the government does will give the kind of result that the government is hoping for. This is just a part and parcel of how the government schemes work. One other government credit initiative that has been working even now, recently it was in the news as well, it is the Kisan credit card scheme. Very similar to how the credit cards that we have. So the farmers are given a kind of a card, like an ATM card basically, RuPay ATM debit card. The limit was up to 3 lakhs earlier. Very recently it has been increased to 5 lakh. So up to 5 lakh of money can be withdrawn. Up to certain amount you can withdraw without much, or up to certain amount you can withdraw without any paperwork, etc. After a certain amount you have to do some paperwork, but up to 5 lakh is available mainly for short-term credit needs. So for short-term need, for example, you need the seeds, you need fertilizer, you need pesticides for the crop cycle, you can do that. It is not for long-term requirements. Long-term means, let's say you have to buy a tractor, you have to build a part of your house. No, for that it doesn't work. It is mainly for short-term credit requirement. It can be used to get money for post-harvest activities as well. It started first of all in 1998. Again, the idea was that farmers do not have to get in this entire circle of banks time and time again. Even if they require a small amount of money for their harvesting cycle, they should not be forced to go to the banks and do the entire process, do the entire paperwork. Let us give them some flexibility, let us have some credit available to them. It was extended for allied non-farming activities in 2004, the government has been extending it. These have been issued. Again, these are RuPay debit cards that have been issued. Age for the farmers to get this card is 18 to 75 years. They are eligible for it. If you are a senior citizen above 60 and then you are getting it, then you have to name a co-borrower, means you have to name a legal heir as a co-borrower. For example, if something happens to you, then the banks should have someone to go to who will give the money back. This is an issue. For example, there is a worrying trend in rural India that what happens in many cases is, let's say a farmer requires certain money from the Kisan credit card. What they do is, rather than withdrawing the money from their credit card, they will withdraw the money from the Kisan credit card of their father or of their grandfather. Again, I am not insinuating anything, but the idea is that if something happens to them, at least they won't have to pay the loan back. That is also part of the problem. Then implementing agencies, because these are at the end of the day banks, right? Someone has to give this money to them, someone has to give it in the form of a loan. So there have to be banks that are associated with this scheme who will offer these credit cards or offer these cards. These are commercial banks, RRBs, small finance bank, cooperatives, all of these offer these cards. Because it is a kind of a loan only, just that it's more of a kind where you would not have to go to the bank time and time again. You would not have to take their permission and do all the small bits of paperwork. As long as the paperwork is done once, your identification has been proven once, the KYC etc. is done, you will get the card and you will have much more freedom to use it rather than coming to the bank for this every single time. Apart from this, as I said, the eligibility is individual farmers, joint borrowers who are owner cultivators can come, tenant farmers can also come, sharecroppers can come, and it is also available for groups, not just an individual farmer. So self-help group can also come in, they can also be given this loan. The age group for the farmers to be eligible to get this card is 18 to 75. But as I said, although it is 18 to 75, the senior citizens, the farmers who are taking that, have to have a legal heir as a co-borrower. Legal heir means someone who is in the relation who will take up their asset and liability after they are gone, their family member, etc. in the next generation, they will be the one who have to be the legal heir in such a case. This is how the Kisan credit card is to be used. This is how the government wants to meet its objectives. So again, please understand, it is not for all kinds of expenditure. It is specifically for certain types of expenditure that the farmers can make. Do remember this, because this has been asked. In fact, Kisan credit card and its related questions have been asked multiple times in the prelims exam. So objective is to have the farmer's short-term credit requirement met. The key term here is short-term. So basically no capital expenditure. No infrastructure building. No heavy machines, no expanding the house, no expanding your storage, no tractors, etc. That all will not be covered under this. Post-harvest expense also is covered. Means if you have cut down the crop, that means the harvest is done. After that also there may be certain expenditure. For example, the farmer has to take the crop and go to the mandi to sell it. That transportation requires money, or they may have to send it somewhere far off. That also requires money. So logistic issues, logistic expenses, etc. All these are post-harvest expenses that will be covered under the scheme. Produce marketing loan. So if they have to market, again, any expense that they are doing in selling of the product, that also is covered. You can take money for that. Consumption requirements of the farmer household. Yes. So for your own family, for their daily needs, for their own consumption, for food and all of these small little expenditure, yes, you can use money for that as well. Working capital for maintenance of farm asset, yes. So again, for maintenance of asset, not for buying of a new asset, please remember. So you already have a machine, you already have a tractor, there has to be some maintenance done, there has to be some repair done, that is permitted. But if you are thinking that I'll buy a new tractor, I'll buy a new machine, from the money coming in from Kisan credit card, that will not be permitted. Apart from that, investment credit requirement for agriculture and allied activities, so the investment etc. that is required will also be allowed here. This has been asked earlier as well, so please make sure that you do remember where the money can be used and where the money cannot be used for Kisan credit card. These are the features, again important. First, as I told you earlier, it's a RuPay enabled, it's a ATM enabled RuPay debit card. So it's slightly problematic here for many people here. Understand, the name of the scheme is Kisan credit card, okay? But the card that will be given to you will be a debit card kind of a thing. So it can be used in ATMs and it's a RuPay card. So there are multiple card issuing companies that you might have heard of. For example, you might have heard of Visa. You might have heard of MasterCard. These are two big global card issuing companies that operate in India as well. The government of India few years back has started RuPay. So these will be RuPay debit cards that will be issued. Aadhaar linkage is compulsory for interest subvention. Two things understandable here. Number one, these are not interest-free loans. So whatever money the farmer is taking out, whatever money the farmer is utilizing, they have to return more than that. So there is an interest involved. Don't think it's an interest-free loan and they can just return whatever they took. No, there is an interest attached to it, number one. And secondly, apart from that, the government does offer the idea of interest subvention. I told you earlier as well, interest subvention simply means a part of your interest rate will be given by the government, will be borne by the government. If your repayment record is good enough, if the government is satisfied that yes, you are adhering to whatever conditions have been put here, you are not trying to cheat the operator, you are not trying to cheat the bank, you are happy to pay your part of the loan. If these kind of conditions are fulfilled, the government will offer you some interest subvention. Also, it has a validity of 5 years. So after 5 years, you have to go to the bank once again and you have to get the card reissued. It's similar to other cards. You know, if you use a debit card or a credit card yourself, you will see that debit or credit cards also have an expiry date. It's written on the card. There's an expiry date that it will be with the card. If you're making a transaction online, they will ask you for the expiry date. Usually it is 5 years only. So usually, for example, if the card that you have is issued, let's say in 2020, in most cases it will have an expiry of 2024 or 2025. So it's a similar kind of a feature. There is no processing fee for loans under this. In most of the cases, when you go and take a loan from the bank, they actually put a processing fee. It's kind of documentation charges that they are giving you the loans, a part of it they will take as a processing fee. Limit of collateral for agricultural loan has been revised from 1 to 1.6 lakh. So as I told you, overall limit is 5 lakh. Overall limit used to be 3 lakh, now it is 5 lakh. In that overall limit, up to certain amount you can withdraw without putting any guarantee, without putting any paperwork. That is collateral free. It used to be 1 lakh. So earlier you could withdraw up to 1 lakh rupees without any paperwork required, without anything. Now you can withdraw up to 1.6 lakh without any paperwork required. However, if you go beyond that, then there has to be a collateral required. You have to visit the bank. Then it can't be just through the ATM. The government offers an interest subvention. So a 7% rate of interest is offered by the bank. Then the government has an interest subvention 2 and 3% depending upon different loans. So 2 to 3% government says I will pay, depending on if you are repaying in a fast manner, if in a practical manner. Then it will come down to 4 to 5% that you will have to pay as a farmer. So it's a good opportunity for the farmers. That is an example of what the Kisan credit card holds for the farmers and how it helps for them. So far, what we discussed was mainly about the credit part of agriculture farming or credit card of rural areas. As I told you earlier, in this chapter, rural development, we are focusing on two aspects. One is credit and the other is marketing. We discussed about the credit part of it, the loans, how easily are they available, what schemes is the government running to make the loans available, so on and so forth. The next part that we have is about marketing. When the farmer has grown the crop, now the money comes in from selling of the crop. This is where the issue now starts. That is what is referred to as marketing. Now, how does the marketing part work? What are the things that the government focuses on, and what exactly are these areas? First of all, just like there are challenges in the credit part of it, challenges in getting loans, similarly there are big challenges in the marketing part of it as well. Big challenges in what the agriculture marketing has in store. For example, first big challenge, absence of storage facilities, a big problem for the farmers. See, when the farmer harvests the crop, they can't immediately sell it tomorrow. What if the market is not suitable right now? What if the production is so much, there is over bumper production that the costs have come down, so they are not getting good price from the market? It may happen that for a few days, for a few weeks, the farmers may have to store the product. This is where the problem starts. Since these are small and marginal farmers, over 85% of India's farmers are small and marginal. That means land holding of less than 2 hectares. They do not have their own storage capabilities. They do not have their own storage. So they don't have money in which they can invest to store. Not just that, food, grains, etc. can still be stored. But when it comes to perishables like vegetables, fruits, you require cold storage. That is very expensive to build. That becomes an even bigger problem. There is a huge lack of cold storage facilities in our country. Now, one part of the storage is the private part. In a lot of villages now, what many investors have done is they have built cold storage. And the farmers can keep their product in the cold storage. They will obviously be charged some money in against of that, so they can rent a part of it. The other part also is, if you have heard about FCI, that is Food Corporation of India. Food Corporation of India is a government agency that is responsible for procuring products from the farmers, mainly in the MSP regime. They store it and then they distribute also in the form of PDS. The Food Corporation of India has a lot of storage facilities, have a lot of godowns, but even their godowns are not enough in number. The Food Corporation of India itself has to actually keep a lot of produce outside the godowns. The problem with storing produce outside the godown is that it is all susceptible to weather. Imagine you are keeping grains outside the godown. If it rains, it is all gone, it's all destroyed. That's a big problem that we are facing. So not just there is shortage of storage in private areas for the private farmers, even the Food Corporation of India, the government's own agency, does not have enough storage facility. There's also a problem of faulty weighing practices in a lot of mandis. The farmers in a lot of cases do not have a big negotiating power. In some cases, they do form groups called FPOs, Farmer Producer Organization, but in a lot of cases, the farmers are individuals stacked up against the buyer, and the buyers in the mandis then dictate how the prices will move. In a lot of cases, they also use faulty measuring techniques where the weight of the crop is not seen or is not shown properly in a transparent manner. That also results in losses for the farmers. There's a problem of manipulative practices by the traders. As I told you, the traders in the mandi know the fact that farmers in India are under a lot of pressure. Most of the farmers don't have any extra saving. So they are dependent that the next cycle of crop will only be possible for them if they are able to sell this cycle of crop and if they have earned some money from that. On the basis of the money earned from the first cycle, only then they will be able to buy input for the next cycle. That is a big problem for a lot of farmers in India, and the buyers recognize this fact. The buyers know that if they just kind of push the farmers, delay the farmers, not buy their product, the farmers ultimately will be forced to sell them at a much lower price. Because the farmers are under so much pressure that I have to sell it anyhow, because without that I will not be able to start my next cycle of produce. That is a big problem. And this is where there are many manipulative practices that the traders have adopted from time to time. A lot of traders make cartels. They know that the farmers are under pressure. There is one big problem as well. Imagine that there is a farmer who has, let's say, produced 1000 kg of a certain vegetable, okay, or a certain food grain or whatever. Now, to transport all of that into the mandi, into the market where it will be sold, they first hire a tractor or a mini truck or whatever be the case. They hire it, they take it to the mandi. To hire that truck, they would have given significant amount of money. The buyer who is sitting in the market knows that this farmer who has come in on a rented tractor, rented truck, cannot afford to take the produce back. If you take it back, then again you have to pay the rent to take it back. Again you have to pay the rent to bring it once again. So they know for a fact that the farmers are under pressure, that once they have brought their produce to the market, they have to sell it. And this is where the buyers now start to pressurize the farmers and they try to bring the cost down. Then lack of market price information, a lot of farmers would not know what exactly is an ideal price for their produce. Maybe the produce that they have has a higher price in the market, but they are just not being given that because they are not aware. When they are not aware, they can't bargain completely, they can't bargain successfully. Lack of information, lack of knowledge on their front also make sure that they have losses in the long run. All these are issues in the agriculture farming space, in the marketing space specifically, that the government is trying to focus on. Which is why there are a bunch of initiatives that the government has introduced in the field of agricultural marketing. Let's see what are these. First, very important, regulation of markets. The government, so the problem with agriculture also is because it is a state subject. In the 7th schedule, if you look at the 3 list, agriculture comes in the state list. And this is where you have to, the central government can't push a lot of things. They have to depend on the states whether they want to accept these initiatives or not. So the government has tried to regulate markets. The government has tried to, for example, make licenses compulsory for people who are coming and buying from the market. So there is license registration as well. That is all done to regulate the market. The government also has tried to build more infrastructure. Infrastructure first in the form of storage, as I said. Storage extremely important, not just private. The Food Corporation of India also lacks in storage. Because they lack storage, that is also a reason why the Food Corporation of India in many cases cannot procure a lot of crops at MSP. Even though the government announces the MSP, the expectation is that all the crops will be sold in MSP, but that is not how it works. Because the Food Corporation of India says, I don't have the storage capability, what will I do after buying these crops? The government also very importantly offers MSP. Now that is a very, very important initiative of the government. Very important, very controversial as well, remains in the news very often. You all would have read about this. MSP is minimum support price. So the government says, for example, you have grown rice or wheat. The government says you go and try sell it in the market. If you are getting a good price, great. If you are not getting a good price, for example, the government says, let's say for wheat, I will buy at 22 rupees per kg. I'm just giving a random example. Let's say for MSP for wheat is 22 rupees per kg. So the government tells the farmer, you go and try and sell your wheat in the market. If you get a price of higher than 22 rupees per kg, then sell in the market, no issues with that. But if you are not getting more than 22, then don't worry, we are here, you sell it to us and we will pay you 22 rupees per kg at least. This is the minimum support price, so that the government ensures that the farmer earns a certain amount of money. If the farmer is growing wheat or rice on their field, they are assured that, okay, at least this much money I will get. Because if the market determines everything, if the buyers are not ready to buy it because maybe the wheat sales have not picked up, maybe the demand for wheat has gone down, maybe the production of wheat has been so much that the price have come down. So to avoid the loss to the farmers, the government announces MSP. Now there are a lot of things about MSP that you should know. All of these are important for the examination. Number one, MSP is not announced for every crop in India. MSP is announced for 22 crops plus sugarcane. So you can say 23 in total, but it is better to write 22 crops plus sugarcane because there is a slightly different provision for sugarcane. The government announces a price for sugarcane also, but that is called as fair and remunerative price. That is slightly different. The reason is that the government buys the farmer's product in the form of MSP to distribute it to the poor, but the government does not buy sugarcane. Sugarcane is bought by the sugar mills, so government is not buying that. But the government still announces the price for sugarcane as well. This is similar to MSP. This is called fair and remunerative price. Who decides MSP? MSP is declared by the government before every cropping season. And it is declared by Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. So government has a Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs that announces the MSP. They announce the MSP, they take the final decision on the basis of a recommendation given by CACP. This is important, do remember this. CACP is Commission on Agriculture Cost and Prices. Commission on Agriculture Crops and Prices. Sorry, crops, cost. Agriculture cost and prices. if the UPSC asks you which authority recommends the MSP, then it is CSCP, they recommend. But if the UPSC asks you which body determines or decides or takes a final call, then it is the Economic Committee on Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. So these are two different things. One of them recommends, other body takes a final decision. Now MSP and how MSP is decided, that is a big issue. Farmers want some other method. For example, right now how the government decides MSP is very interesting. If you actually look at it, the government takes into consideration two factors. First, the government takes into consideration whatever is the input cost of the farmer. This is called A2. A2 is input cost, means cost of seeds, fertilizer, pesticide, any water bill that they would have to pay, electricity bill that they would have to pay. So the input cost will be one big component of it. Second component that the government considers is FL. FL here stands for family labor. So let's assume there are 4 people of a family who are working on this field. If these 4 people would have been working somewhere else on some other job, they would have been getting some salary. Just because they are working in this field, they are not getting a salary, but then there is an input cost attached. So what the government does, government basically takes these two into consideration, A2 plus FL, and they multiply it by 1.5 to make the MSP. 1.5, the logic is the government is giving 50% margin to the farmer. That if the total cost of input and family labor on growing a certain crop is rupees 100, then we will give you 150 as the MSP. That is how it is currently decided in India. These two things are taken into consideration, the A2 that is the input cost and the FL that is the family labor involved. Having said that, you would have seen recently there is so much protest on the side of the farmers in multiple states. Although they demand a lot of different things, but one demand that they make consistently is about the MSP. One big demand that they make is MSP should be given a legal status. The issue is right now MSP does not have a legal status, meaning that there is no law about MSP. It is not written in the constitution. The government decides it on the basis of executive actions. So the fear that the farmers have is that tomorrow if the government does not announce MSP, then you can't go to the court against it. That is one part of the story. Other big demand from the farmers is that in the calculation of MSP, they want one more factor here. They want one more factor to be included, not just two, they want one more, that is land rent. The argument here is that a lot of farmers who are farming have taken the land on rent, and that rental cost of the land also should be included here to calculate the MSP. The famous Swaminathan committee that was formed about 20 years back, also called as a National Commission for Farmers, they had suggested that MSP calculation should include the rental cost of the land as well. But the government does not take that into consideration. The government says that no, we don't believe that a lot of farmers in India are doing agriculture on rented land. We believe it is their own land, so there is no point of giving or considering land of the rent or rent of the land as well. This is all you need to know about MSP. Then the government also has this policy of buffer stock. India is a country that has historically seen a lot of famines, seen many people dying because of lack of food. The government does not want that kind of a situation to exist again. So what the government does is, Government of India every single quarter, every 3 months, the cabinet decides how much buffer stock, means how much minimum food stock, mainly wheat and rice, should the Food Corporation of India maintain. So they are given a number that this is the minimum stock that you should maintain no matter what. It changes quarter to quarter. Usually the Food Corporation of India maintains much more than what the buffer stock is recommended. So their usual record, if you look at it, they usually maintain almost 1.5 times, even more than that, of the buffer stock that is suggested by the government. Then the government also has a public distribution system called the PDS. These are ration shops of the government through which they distribute food grains at a very highly subsidized price. You all would have read or at least heard about National Food Security Act, under which the government gives food grains at a highly subsidized price, let's say 3 rupees per kg rice, 2 rupees per kg for wheat, 1 rupees per kg for other food grains, coarse grains like millets, etc. 5 kg per person per month is given under this program. Bottom 75% of rural population and bottom 50% of urban population is given this food grain under the National Food Security Act. All this is done through the PDS system, and this entire process in the back end is being coordinated by the Food Corporation of India. It's a very key agency for the government. If the Food Corporation of India would not have existed, they would not be working, then none of these things would be able to work properly. They play an extremely important role in all of these activities that you see on the screen, that is the Food Corporation of India. They are the ones who procure the crops, they are the ones who store it, they are the ones who will then make sure it is available in the PDS shops to be distributed. That is where the Food Corporation of India comes in. One more suggestion I will give you from my side. It is not given in NCERT books, but do read about the Shanta Kumar Committee on Food Corporation of India. A few years back, a committee was formed called Shanta Kumar Committee to recommend about how to improve the working of Food Corporation of India. So they suggested how to improve its capability, how to improve its working. Very important, do read about that later on. Now, realizing the problem that the farmers face, realizing the fact that farmers lack earning opportunities, the government has started certain new initiatives. They have given certain more freedom to the farmers. Like two very interesting things that have now been allowed in India is contract farming and direct marketing. Contract farming is, imagine a situation where you all have one favorite company of potato chips. It can be Uncle Chips or Lay's or whatever. Have you realized, no matter wherever you buy that product in India, let's say Lay's, no matter where you buy Lay's chips from anywhere in India, the taste will almost be the same. Doesn't matter you bought it in Chennai, or you bought it in Hyderabad, or you bought it in Delhi, Mumbai, you buy it in the most rural area, doesn't really matter, the taste will be the same. How? The reason is that they make sure the potatoes that are used to create those chips is always the same variety of potato. So what these companies do is, they have a long-term contract with the farmers. They engage the farmers, sign a contract saying that you will only grow this specific kind of potato. We will give you the seeds. You will have to maintain this condition. You will only sell it to us and no one else. So it gives a good earning opportunity to the farmer, and the farmers also are given this kind of an assurance that, okay, if I do everything right, I will earn this X amount of money. So that is now allowed in India. That is contract farming, under which your income risk reduces. You don't have to look for buyers for your produce. Companies have already signed a contract with you and you will be given that money. Then there is also an issue of direct marketing. So if you look in agriculture in India, one other aspect of agriculture you will study later on is something called APMC. Agricultural Produce and Marketing Committees. Every state in India have their own APMC laws. under which the state government has formed so-called mandis called APMC mandis. These were formed because the farmers did not have a specific place to sell their produce. Many of them were blackmailed, so government said, don't worry, we will make our own mandis. So now every district in India would have one mandi where the farmers can take their produce and they can sell it there. It started as an initiative to protect the farmers from the blackmailing that they were facing through the hands of the private buyers. But it actually started to backfire, in the sense that in the long run, the farmers now in most of the states were forced that you can now only sell your produce in the mandi and nowhere else. That became a big problem. Farmers now started to realize that when they go to the mandi, the same thing is happening. That some buyers who have taken the license to buy from the mandi, they know that the farmers can't sell anywhere else. The farmer has to come to the mandi only. So why not blackmail the farmers now to extract as much money from them as possible? So over the years, and also the farmers have to pay a fee in the mandi. There's a commission that the government charges so that they can maintain the mandi. So the problem is the farmers were forced to now sell through the mandi, and that became a big problem. Now the government has allowed them direct marketing, means the government has allowed that you don't have to compulsorily go to mandi only to sell your produce. If you think you are getting a better price somewhere else, feel free to go ahead and sell your produce. It is your produce and you have to be given the freedom to decide where you sell. And this is where e-NAM comes in the picture. One of the most significant initiatives taken up by the government in the past few years in the field of agriculture marketing is e-NAM. It is an online portal. The idea is simple. Let's say you are a farmer in Hyderabad and you don't want to sell your produce in the mandi. You have grown something, you know that when you go to the state mandi, they will not give you a good price. They will blackmail you. Maybe you think that someone sitting in Gwalior, someone sitting in Chennai, someone sitting in Calcutta, Kolkata may give you a better price. But how do you come in touch with them now? This is where this portal comes in the picture. So what the government does, the simple process is, what you do, you take very small part of your produce to the local mandi. What will they do? They will do a testing, quality check will happen. After quality is tested, they will list your product on this portal. So they'll make a listing that this farmer from this and this part of India has 500 kg, 5000 kg of this produce. This is the quality, this has been tested. Whoever wants to buy can now auction or can now put in their price. So buyers from across the country now will log in here on this portal. Whoever wants it will be bidding. Whoever wants it will say, okay, I'm ready to pay this much, I'm ready to pay that much. Whoever makes the highest bid, the farmer will get in touch with them and the cost, and then they will transport the product to that particular buyer. That's a win-win for the farmer and for the buyer. The buyer also may be getting a better price than their local mandi, or they may be getting a better quality than their local mandi. Seller also is getting a better price. It has to be through the APMC mandis only because a testing or etc. has to be done there. Most of the states, not all, but most of the state governments have now collaborated to make sure that APMCs have become a part of NAM. Even today, not all APMCs are a part of the e-NAM portal, but most of them have become a part of the e-NAM portal. It is a win-win situation for the farmers. This is what e-NAM is doing. So it is giving support services, it offers logistics support, credit issue, credit payments, etc. So it helps the farmer. Farmer is not left on their own. The farmer is not told that no, we will only list you now, you do whatever you want. No, APMC will help them, e-NAM will help them in making sure that the payments are fine, that the credit services are given properly. They'll also help them in, as I said, quality grading assurance, so that the buyer and the seller, both of them can be assured that whatever the agreement that they are getting into is not something that will harm them. Then they also ensure transparent pricing. real time, everyone can see on the portal what the pricing is, no hidden cost. So everyone knows it's a transparent transaction taking place. It's a unified market. Anyone sitting in any part of the country can sell to anyone sitting in any other part of the country. Earlier, it was like if you are from Hyderabad, you have to sell someone who's in Hyderabad or in nearby areas only. Maybe they are not getting maybe they will not offer you a good price. Maybe they don't want to sell it. Maybe the product that you have is not sold locally, doesn't have any demand in your state. That may also happen. What if the produce that you have is in much more demand in Delhi, is in much more demand, let's say in Shimla, much more demand in Jaipur? It may happen. This is where that buyer who is sitting in those parts will have much more demand of it. It also ensures online trading. So there's a national audience, as we discussed. This is what eNAM is, a big initiative for the farmers that the government has taken in this field of agriculture marketing. So it's all online. The farmer or the customer doesn't have to physically meet. It reduces the cost of transaction. It reduces the cost of going to the mandi time and time again. So it allows them to undertake online trading. But again, you have to have access to computer or mobile phone. That is one deterrent. This is where panchayats can be helpful. The government is trying to ensure that every panchayat in the country, every village has a panchayat. Every panchayat should have broadband connectivity, should have a computer system that is available for use publicly as well. So this is where some of the initiatives, or this is how eNAM is trying to improve the situation. It makes a single market, as I told you. The farmers get access to many more buyers competing against each other. And when it's a free market, that is when you have the correct discovery of your price. Your price or the correct price can only be discovered if it's a free market and people are just ready to bid as per what they think the real cost or the real price should be. Apart from that, it's very much more transparent, because in the mandis, increasingly, as I said, when the farmers were selling in the mandis, it was increasingly becoming a kind of a cartel, where very few people who had taken the license to be the buyers in the mandi were forcing the farmers to sell at a price that they would want, even if the farmers did not like it. That is something that was always working in the interest of the farmers, the interest of the buyers rather. Now with this kind of a situation coming in, the farmers realize the fact that it is actually something that is in their favor. The online quality, the quality testing and the grading also make sure that both of the parties are appearing or are actually doing business in good faith. The buyer also can be rest assured that the quality of product that he or she is auctioning or bidding on will be of good quality. In 2022, National Agriculture Market Platform, that is the eNAM, was launched officially, and they were able to now get farmers to sell anywhere. Now please understand, for this to run successfully, APMCs have to integrate themselves first with NAM. Without the state APMCs actually saying that yes, we should integrate with eNAM, without them successfully doing this, eNAM will not function. It will only function as long as the farmers are able to, or as long as the state mandis are willing to integrate them with eNAM. If they don't integrate that, then the farmers would not be able to take advantage of this. So this is where the state governments also have to come on that same page. The state governments also have to make sure that yes, we are also in agreement with what the situation is or what the eNAM portal provides. This is where the problem of center versus state comes in time and time again. As I said, agriculture is a state subject. Center government can't force it upon the states. Center government can only push for the government, or the state government cannot be pushed to do something against their wishes. The state government can only be nudged towards this by the center government. If the center government wants something to happen in the field of agriculture, they can only nudge them. They can make a kind of a model law as they have done for APMC. We have a model APMC Act which the central government made for union territories. They also ask the state governments if they want to implement it, but most state governments have a mind of their own. This portal also ensures that there is online payment and the support of the farmers, the support that the farmers require for storage, for warehousing, etc. All that also is being done by the government. This is also something that the government has been working on. So it's still very early days to say that eNAM has been very successful or not. So far the signs have been good. It's safe to say that so far most of the objectives that the government had with respect to eNAM have been fulfilled. Yes, there is still a long way to go. It will depend a lot on the integration of farmers, integration of this market, but we'll have to see how some states that have not implemented it go ahead and take it in the future. Now, so far we have discussed about first the credit side of agriculture and then the marketing side of agriculture, meaning that the government's focus on how the farmers can get more loans for their activities, and second, the government's focus on how can they better sell their produce at a better price in an easier manner. However, the government has realized that this alone is not enough. If you only keep the farmers or the rural population rather restricted to agriculture alone, we might never be able to improve their quality of life, improve their standard of living. The Prime Minister's announcement of doubling the farmers' income can only be made possible if you add some other aspects of occupation in the rural areas. That is where what the government has tried to do is diversify the options available in the rural areas. So what the government is doing, pushing the farmers, I won't say away from agriculture, but towards many other activities as well, in order to make sure that they can have another source of income. What is it that they are doing? Some of these examples include, let's say, ecotourism. Ecotourism means increasingly a lot of people from within the country and outside the country, when they visit these rural areas, they have a sense of fascination towards it. Someone who is living in cities who has never seen a village, they don't know how the villages work, they don't know the village life. They're very fascinated and interested in knowing the nitty-gritties of the village. So why not invite them and have a proper tourist setup, tourist circuit, so that they are given facilities along with telling them or making them experience the village life. That is an idea of ecotourism. People are not just going to fancy places now in the name of tourism. They are going into the rural areas, into what they call as real India, to experience this life. That can be a way for the farmers and the agriculturists to earn more income. Then an issue of seasonal labor migration. So one other issue is a lot of the farmers are not farmers for 12 months. So in the middle, when they don't have a lot of agriculture options available, then they're looking for something alternative. MGNREGA is one example, but there's a lot of migration that happens. You will see there's seasonal migration. People who are working on the fields for, let's say, 9 to 10 months in a year, they then migrate to urban areas for a couple of months. There is also the government's focus on handicrafts, making sure that the art in the form of handicrafts, painting, sculpting, etc. is also given a push. Apart from monocrop farming. Monocrop farming, for example, means the government is trying to ensure that the districts that are, for example, let's say famous for one single kind of a crop have also to be given some identification. Let's say GI tag should be given to them so that their income opportunities can increase. Apart from that, the government is pushing the farmers away into some other areas as well. These are called allied agricultural activities. Allied agriculture means they are a part of agriculture, but not core farming. Not just focusing on, let's say, food grains, not just focusing on important things like vegetables, etc., but focusing on something related to agriculture, that is called as allied agriculture. First is animal husbandry. A lot of farmers have animals with them for different needs. They use it to help in labor when it comes to agriculture activities. They also use it for, let's say, poultry. When they lay eggs, they sell eggs in the market. They also use them for milk and milk products. This has had a very positive impact. In India, for example, India is the largest producer of milk in the world. It was made possible because of the white revolution that we had in India. And the government is now trying to give it an even further push and launch White Revolution 2.0. Animal husbandry includes livestock farming that gives an additional income to the farmers. That includes poultry, dairy farming, sheep rearing, all of these activities. White Revolution, as I said, or also known as Operation Flood, was instrumental in improving India's milk production. Now, India has the largest production of milk, but that doesn't mean that we export a lot of it, because the consumption also is very high. Because of the huge population that we have, and because of the fact that in rural areas especially, you do not have many other nutritional supplements available. The most easily available source of nutrition in most of the rural families is milk and milk products. This is where a lot of consumption happens in India. Although, again I am repeating, we are the largest producer of milk, but there are still efforts going on to improve our production, because the productivity, that is the amount of milk that we are getting from Indian breeds, is below the global average. So we are trying to see if we can improve the milk production from our own Indian breeds. That is where the government has been focusing on. There are states such as Gujarat, Maharashtra, UP, Rajasthan, where milk production is a major occupation. Companies such as Amul is a humongous success. Amul is the biggest example of a cooperative in India, how they have been successful in bringing lakhs of farmers together, giving them an alternate source of employment, improving their standard of living. All this has played a major role in India's milk revolution or white revolution. Now, just like we have a census of human beings, the 2021 census that has been delayed considerably, similarly, India also conducts a livestock census. Livestock census, as the name suggests, where the government actually looks into the number of livestock that we have. This livestock census, now please understand this, this is the data of 20th livestock census. At the time of me recording this lecture, the 21st livestock census is ongoing. When I am recording this, the 21st livestock census is still ongoing. The data is not out yet. The data might get released later on at the end of 2025. Then you might get more updated data. The data that we have here is of the 20th livestock census, and this is that data. This is India's livestock population. India has the world's largest population of livestock. Amongst them also, a majority of them is just poultry. After that come the bovines. Bovines include cattle, buffalo, mithun, yak, etc. Then we have goats, then we have sheep. This is a major breakup of the livestock population that we have. It is a major economic contributor to the overall GDP. If you look at its contribution, 4.11% of India's total GDP comes in just from livestock. Remember, the total GDP, out of that 4.11% coming in just from livestock. Over 25% of India's agriculture GDP coming in from livestock. So over 1/4 of agriculture GDP just from livestock. It employs 8.8% of India's population. So in every way possible, it is a huge contributor to India's economic growth. It's a huge contributor to where India is right now. And government realizes that we still have not exploited the complete potential that it has. We can still do much more, we can still have much more out of it, and we can have farmers earning much more income, and that is why the government is focusing on the animal husbandry part of it. This is what Operation Flood or milk or the White Revolution resulted in. Increased milk production many-fold, made India largest producer of milk, empowered the farmers. The other aspect of it, the nutrition. As I said earlier, in India, especially in the rural areas, there are not many alternatives available to get nutrition. This is where the most available source or the readily available source is milk and milk products. So this is what helps us in nourishment improvement as well. India has been lagging behind in this. We saw in the last chapter as well, in chapter number 4, how a large part of our population is still stunted, wasted. Because of this, we need nutritional supplements, and milk is a great source for that. It also has led to boosting of the economy, of the income for the farmers, reduce the pressure on the government, because see, every single year you see so many farmer suicides in India, unfortunately. If you look at the data released by National Crime Record Bureau that releases their suicide report every alternate year, you will see thousands of farmers committing suicide because of crop loss, because their entire income is dependent on crop and the harvest. And when that fails due to one reason or the other, they have no fallback option. So this is where livestock, animal husbandry plays such a key role, where they are able to make sure that they are not just dependent on one single source of their income. This is what the Right Revolution gave us. It, as I said, made India largest producer, self-sustainable, and it was the biggest boost to India's cooperative framework. Amul, that is the flag bearer of the White Revolution, is the most successful example of a cooperative in India. It is an example of a cooperative that has been able to get the kind of, or that has been able to get lakhs of farmers empowered, bring all these farmers together, improve their income considerably. We also have a national milk grid now for much better distribution of milk. In fact, on this basis, a lot of states in India have launched, state governments have launched their own cooperatives of milk to bring the farmers together. For example, in Karnataka, you have the Nandini, where the cooperatives have been formed to bring the farmers together who can earn more money with the milk production and milk products. We have minimized the price variations. It is the farmers who are getting the advantage, who are getting the benefit straight away rather than a middleman coming in and them earning the money. It has also modernized the dairy sector. Just a few months back, Amul, in fact, also signed a contract with an American company to now start selling dairy products in America as well, which is a huge achievement. Again, at the end of the day, it's just a cooperative started by farmers, and even today it has lakhs of farmers working together. And for such a cooperative to have such important or such great outcomes, it's a big, big, big thing for us. Having realized that, the government very recently launched White Revolution 2.0 to improve the milk production even further. The aim of White Revolution 2.0 is to have daily production of milk, which is right now 660 lakh liters per day, or in other words, 6.6 crore liters per day, increase it to 1000 lakh, means increase it to 10 crore liters per day in the next 5 years. That is the government's aim. Secondly, the government wants to build 1 lakh cooperative societies, either upgrade the existing ones or to set up the new ones. Cooperative is a structure that has worked very, very well in the dairy sector especially, and the government does not want to ruin an idea that has already been working. We want to work in this field, we want to work with this model going ahead. The government of India has also been focusing on women empowerment, because a lot of women are employed in this sector. It is the women of the household that take up the responsibility of milking of the cows, and then they are the ones who are contributing to this entire area of production. So their income has increased and has a lot more potential to be increased, and the nutritional impact as we had discussed. So with one single successful idea, a lot of these can be achieved. Empowerment of women, empowerment of farmers overall, empowerment of rural economy, having better nutrition in the plate, all this can be done. And this is why the government is so upbeat about White Revolution and White Revolution 2.0. Apart from the animal husbandry part, one other area where we as a country have done immensely well, although we don't really pay a lot of attention, I don't know why, is the fishery part. If you look at India's exports, for example, India exports a lot of sea products to countries such as US. Frozen shrimp is a major export from India. India is blessed to have such a long coastline, because of which we have a lot of potential in marine resources and fisheries, and the government has also been focused on that. There are two aspects of it. Inland fishing means from fishing from the water bodies within the country, lakes, ponds, rivers, etc., reservoirs that have been built specifically for that purpose. And then there is marine fishing, it is a coastal fishing, etc. And because we have such a long coastline, we have been blessed with a lot of marine productions, a lot of marine fisheries, something that we have exploited very well in terms of our export. There are some problems attached to it. Very often you will see news stories that fishermen from Tamil Nadu have been arrested in Sri Lanka because they crossed over to the Sri Lankan side. You would also see that there are environmental aspects of it. The ships, for example, the huge ships that are used by fishermen, which are called as trawlers. Trawlers, these are huge ships that are used by fishermen. They have such huge nets that they actually reach till the bottom of the sea, the seabed. And when they reach till the seabed, they actually destroy a lot of marine ecosystem, and they end up catching a lot of very small fish as well. Now please understand, fishing also has to be done in a very sustainable manner. When you are catching fish and you catch fish that is too small, too young, obviously it would not have much economic value, it would not be sold at a good price. Fish is mainly sold in terms of their weight. And when you are catching fish that are too small, too young, you are not allowing them to grow big, so you are actually terminating the entire life cycle of this marine ecosystem in between. So the small fish, they would not grow up, they would not be big enough to be caught later on, and you are actually harming your own prospects. So that is why the government is trying to now regulate fishing, especially banning the use of trawlers, making sure that these are sustainable practices, that the fish that are not required, if they are caught by mistake, they should be sent back into the water. All these things are of prime importance for the government, because the government wants and sees fishing as a good source of revenue for the farmers. Similarly, there is also horticulture. Horticulture involves cultivation of fruits, vegetables, flowers, spices, etc. That also has a lot of potential. These are usually sold at a much higher price as compared to food grains. The problem with horticulture, however, is these are all perishable. Perishable means that these are all products that have a small shelf life, and if you have to improve their shelf life, you require cold storage for them. You know, you all would have heard in your household, your mother, your parents tell you that the older the rice, the better it becomes. The rice that is older is sold at a higher price. So for food grains, storing them, etc., is much easier. Wheat and rice, they are easier. You don't require cold storage as much for wheat and rice. But for perishables like fruits and vegetables, they require a certain temperature to be maintained. And that becomes problematic. Although they have a lot of potential, India exports a lot of horticulture products. Countries such as Europe, countries such as US, look at West Asia or the Middle East as you call it. Most of them don't produce anything on their own. They all import that stuff from India. Especially vegetables, fruits are all imported from India. So India, in that sense, has a lot of potential. But again, the problem here is that it requires a lot more infrastructure. This horticulture sector especially accounts for nearly 1/3 of the value of agricultural output and 6% of India's GDP. So in agriculture itself, 1/3 of it is just horticulture. It's not that we are not doing it, we are doing it, but the scope to expand it even further is much, much more. And this is where the government is trying to push the farmers. We are already the largest producer of fruits like mangoes, bananas, cashew nuts also, and this is in large demand. The problem also with this is that we are exporting these kind of things. You have to maintain the quality. For example, a few years back, there was this big dispute about the Alfonso mangoes. So, Alfonso mangoes are exported from India to all parts of the world. A few years back, Alfonso mangoes that were exported from India to Europe, and one of the boxes that they would have opened up, they saw a fruit fly coming out. Now, what is a fruit fly? It's a very small insect, much smaller than a normal fly. I'm sure all of you would have seen that insect I'm talking about. You may know that insect by different names in your local language. That's a fruit fly. Even if you just Google fruit fly, you will know what I'm talking about. So, in one of the boxes, fruit fly came out. Now, I'm not judging anyone, but from India's perspective, if something like that happens, you won't discard the entire box. You won't say that now I will not eat anything. You might not be feeling great about it, but you don't discard. So, what Europe did was they are very, very, very strict when it comes to these kind of issues, the quality of the products, especially edible products, they are very strict about that. So, they banned Alfonso mangoes from India. They said that we can't import, and that went on for many years. It's very recently that now Indian mangoes are again being sent to Europe. So, when you are exporting these things to countries, not just Europe, West Asia also, when you are exporting these things, you have to be very well aware of the standard, the quality that has to be maintained, the requirement of the quality. This is where India is slightly lagging. We still have to do a much better job as compared to what we are doing here. But again, it has a lot of scope, it has a lot of potential, but things have to be improved. I'll give you one more example. Usually, when you go to the market, let's say to buy a fruit in India, the usual practice is, let's say there are 3 varieties of apple. The one that is the most shiny, that is the brightest, that particular variety usually actually is sold at the highest price. Then there is a variety that is sold at a lower price. For example, let's say there is a mark on the apple which is sold at a slightly lower price. And then if you have an apple which has a lot of black marking, it will still be sold but at the lowest price. So, the one will be at, first will be at 250 rupees per kg, then 200 rupees per kg, then 150 rupees per kg. But in countries such as US, what happens? They don't even allow an apple to be sold in the market even if it has a very small marking. Even the smallest of marking it has, it will not go into the market, it will just not be allowed to sell in the market. That is how their standards are. It's not just even about the taste, even visually if they have a problem with it, they will not even allow it to go in the market. That is why you have to maintain these standards. If you have to focus on things such as horticulture in the long run, that is an issue that we are facing in India. Now, having said that, it is not that horticulture is so easy. As I told you, horticulture does involve an extra effort from the side of the farmers. Not just the practices are slightly different. Imagine there's a farmer who is very well trained in how to grow rice and wheat and other products. To push those farmers and tell them that now don't grow this, grow something else, it is not that easy. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's not like farmer can just grow up tomorrow and say, okay, now I'll cultivate fruits. It requires specific kind of soil, specific types of inputs, specific types of labor. All that becomes a part. Cold storage is one aspect of it, but growing itself is not that easy. So, the practices of horticulture itself has related pros and cons to it. Pros, as I told you, very high export potential. A lot of countries are not as diverse as India, not as gifted as India when it comes to our climate, when it comes to our soil and land, etc. Meaning that a lot of what India can grow easily is not grown anywhere in the world that easily. Fruits and vegetables that are grown in India are not really available to grow in most parts of the world. That is why West Asia specifically, for example, has to be dependent on almost every commodity that has to be eaten, has to be imported. Middle East, as you call it, thankfully they have the money to import that. Europe, for example, a lot of European countries have to import all the vegetables, fruits. This is where there is a lot of export potential specifically. It also gives year-round jobs, because if you have decided that I will enter into cultivation of fruits, horticulture, then depending upon which part of the year or which crop that you choose, which fruit that you choose, you can try and circulate that throughout the entire year. It also leads to women employment opportunities, which increases in large numbers. Women are able to get hold of that opportunity as compared to some of the other things where women would not have would not be in a position to actually get a lot of employment. There are cons. First, poor infrastructure. That is the current situation where we are in. It requires a lot of storage, and not just storage but cold storage facility, which is extremely expensive. And cold storage not just about storing those crops, exporting them. When you're exporting something, let's say fruit or a vegetable, to a far off country, let's say you're sending it to Europe by these big ships, containers, that means they again have to be cold stored. They again have to maintain a proper set of temperature. So it's a very expensive exercise. Then the weak marketing linkage. The APMCs, ENAMs that we have work well, but mainly for food crops right now, the crop grains that we have, food grains. But they have not been tested that well for vegetables, fruits, spices, etc. This is where there is no proper available infrastructure at scale to sell them in the market at a good price. Insufficient processing units, as in a lot of these things are not like grains that are just harvested and sold in the market directly. Many of them have to be processed. For example, look at the cashew nuts that you have or almonds that you have. They are called dry fruits. Dry fruit basically means it is a fruit that is dried and then it is sold in the market. So it's a dried form of a fruit. That means you have to process the fruit that you have. You have to process what you are actually harvesting. So there is one additional step that is involved here. So food processing industry also has to be a part of this entire horticulture exercise. That adds the cost, that adds the requirement for having better infrastructure. So it's slightly complicated. Having said that, it's not that we are not doing our bit. India has a lot more potential than we are, but as of today, if you look at India's situation, horticulture, we are the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables. It contributes, as we discussed, about 1/3 of GDP in our agriculture GDP specifically. We are producing about 320.48 million tons of horticulture produce, which for the first time has surpassed food grain production, which is a huge achievement. Please understand, when India started with Green Revolution, it made India self-sufficient in food grains. But the problem was that it was just focused on food grains. It was not focused on cash crops, on horticulture, etc. Secondly, it only focused on specific areas, Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, presence of alluvial soil, presence of groundwater, nearby rivers, held in irrigation as well. So a lot of areas still remained untouched even after the Green Revolution. This is where horticulture, for example, can play an important role and has been playing an important role here. The productivity of horticulture is also much higher as compared to food grains. Productivity and production are two different things. Production means overall total how much you produce. So let's say you produce 100 kg of rice, that is your production. But 100 kg of rice is produced in how much land? Cultivation that is done, let's say in 1 hectare of land, how much rice are you producing? That is the productivity that you have. So kg per hectare, for example, will be your productivity. The problem India has is, as compared to many countries, let's say China for example, India has much lower agricultural productivity in India. So on the same piece of land of the same measurement in China, they are able to grow more produce as compared to India, which is a big problem. The good part is, in terms of horticulture, it has or it offers us better productivity than food grains at least. So that there the situation is good, that we have better productivity in terms of our horticulture. So the same amount of area that we would have, if we use it for horticulture, we are able to get more output as compared to if the same area was used for food grains specifically. Also, the productivity of horticulture has also increased significantly. It is also a kind of a relief to the soil. Think of it from that point of view. When you utilize the soil for growing the same crop over and over and over again for years and decades, you are extracting the same kind of nutrients out of the soil. You are not allowing the soil to recoup, you are not allowing the soil to recover its productivity. When you mix and match, when the food grains, the crops are mixed and matched with vegetables, with fruits for example, you are allowing the soil the time to recover its productivity. You are allowing the soil a chance that, okay, no issues, we are now growing something else, so maybe it will help you recover that time period. That time period is given to you. This is where it is helpful for them. If you look at the report of Food and Agriculture Organization FAO, India leads in production of certain vegetables like ginger, okra, banana, mangoes, papaya, and all these are in huge demand around the entire world. I already gave you the example of Alfonso mangoes from India. Many other fruits from India go to many other parts of the world. In terms of export, we are 14th in terms of vegetables, 23rd in terms of fruit. That also is because, don't think why is it that our production is so high, so export is low. See, it's a function of our population. When you have such a huge population, obviously the consumption will also be high. So you don't just look at the amount that we are producing. Export will not always be in proportion to that because we are consuming a lot of it in India itself. Only the leftover which is not consumed in India then goes away. Apart from that, about 15 to 20% fruits and vegetables are wasted. That is a big problem. Imagine this. If that would have not wasted, how much more money could have been earned? And that waste is due to various things. Absence of cold storage, absence of the proper supply chain, means from the time that it is sold from the farmer to the time that it reaches the buyer, in between that everything comprises a supply chain. So a lot of it gets spoiled because proper temperature was not maintained, because it took too much time for traveling, because the roads were not up to the mark. So it is when the government says that we will be building better infrastructure for farmers, they are not just referring to storage. They also mean to say roads, highways, expressways. All that is an extremely important part of this entire agriculture supply chain. Because when you are supplying something 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 kg from a farmer, let's say in Chennai, to someone sitting in Punjab, you have to make sure that the time that is taken to transport that stuff is much lower. That can only be ensured with better roads to avoid spoiling of a lot of these fruits and vegetables. This is how horticulture sector, especially in India, is important. It is one of the sunrise sectors. What is sunrise sector? Sunrise sectors are those sectors that have a lot of potential in the coming years. These are the sectors that will bloom in the future, where if you invest or if you start working as early as possible, it will be helpful for you. So it enhances the foreign exchange earnings, because you will have an opportunity where you are able to sell it at a much higher price. You are also able to get foreign exchange in return. As a country that imports a lot of stuff, we value foreign exchange immensely. So that's a very good contributor to a foreign exchange. It enables rural development, and the long-term aim that the Prime Minister had announced of doubling the farmer's income, for that also it plays a very, very, very crucial role. Horticulture also plays a big role in food nutritional security, making sure that the nutritional needs of the farmers are taken care of, making sure that the farmers are able to get whatever amount that they need in their pocket, and the population on the other hand also has enough nutrition on their plate. Apart from that, the potential in India, as I said, is very, very, very high. Because see, these kind of things like agriculture, horticulture, they require a huge amount of labor, and not just labor that does not charge a lot of money. One of the reasons why agriculture is still a big part of our GDP is that number one, it employs a lot of people, and secondly, in a developing country like India, you need labor that does not charge a lot of money. Imagine if the same labor who is working on the fields, who is working on the farms, starts charging a lot of money, farming and agriculture, horticulture will all become unsustainable. The reason why they are sustainable in India or they are helping India is because the labor cost is low. So the moment the labor cost becomes high, it will become a problem. So abundant labor force availability with low labor cost, all that plays into the hands of India. All these are big strengths that India has. It's a similar strength that other developing countries have. For example, why is it that almost every iPhone that is built by Apple is outside of America? They don't build any iPhone in America. Till recently, most of it was built in China. Now a lot of it is being shifted to India. But the reason is not that in China or in India they have the labor that is not present anywhere. This is the most skilled labor. That is not true. The reason why their production and their supply chain is in countries like China, Vietnam, India is because the labor cost is lower. They will be able to find an American doing the same kind of job as an Indian is doing, but he or she will charge much higher amount of salary because of very strict minimum wage laws that America has. In American states, for example, in most of American states, the minimum wages are $15 per hour. Imagine, translate that into the Indian wages, $15 per hour. Most of these people who are working in these factories would not even earn $15 in an entire day. And in America, in most of the states, $15 per hour is a minimum. So imagine the cost of labor that companies such as Apple would have to pay in US, and that's why they outsource. So this is where India has an advantage. I'm not saying the labor cost should remain low, but I'm saying as per the current scenario, this is what works in our favor as of now. Obviously, as our economy grows up, you would want to be in a situation where everyone is earning higher amount of money. That is true. But at least as of now, this is working in our favor. Now, apart from these allied activities, the allied activities that we studied are not farming, but are related to agriculture only somehow. They are all working on the farm only. Now, in rural part of the country, rural development, Government of India is also focusing a bit on non-farm employment. What if we can take the rural person, the individual, the farmer slightly away from the farm, and what if we are able to give him or her some other employment apart from farming? Because see, the problem with farming, even in horticulture and all, is that it is a lot dependent on factors that you can't control. Like the entire agriculture is so much dependent on weather, which you have no control over. If your crop requires rain of a certain amount and it doesn't rain, then there's not much that you can do. There's nothing much that the government will be able to do, nothing much that you can do. So this is where farming output can never be assured, or you can never be assured that you will have a certain amount of output in farming. This is why the government also is trying to push the farmers towards non-farm employment. For example, first, agro processing. This is a huge bet that the government is taking. It requires a lot more infrastructure to be set up. As I said, a lot of products are sold in the market which are not in the form in which they actually were harvested. So converting the product, fruit, vegetable, from the form it was harvested in to the form in which it will be sold in the market, the middle linkage here is given by the food processing industry. Agro processing, food processing, this is where it has a lot of potential. In export also, when you're exporting these stuff, you have to increase the shelf life of all these products. Increasing the shelf life, because you can't have a situation where fruit or a vegetable, if it is kept out of the refrigerator, it will start to go bad after 3-4 days. You can't afford that. You have to improve and increase their shelf life. You have to make sure they don't go bad for multiple days. This is where food processing industry has to play a big role. The food processing industry will make sure that the shelf life increases. Apart from that, rural tourism, as I discussed earlier as well. People don't just visit these big cities and these big monuments. A lot of people increasingly are showing interest in visiting villages, visiting that form of life and trying to come close to nature. A lot of people, especially living in the cities, miss going close to the nature, and this is where tourism has a potential which can be explored, and the government is trying to do that. A lot of tourist circuits have been launched by the government. You would have heard about Buddhist circuit, Ramayana circuit, where the government is trying to have these packages where people will be taken to these places. So the same can be done with village and rural areas as well. Handicraft cottage industry. There is still a lot of demand, especially outside India, of products made of leather, handicraft products, pottery, etc. A lot of these skills that are done by hand, they are still in a lot of demand. Not just in India, but outside India as well. So that can also be explored in the long run. Retail and trade, small shops, wholesale trading, because if everyone is producing something in the village, someone has to sell also, right? So pushing the farmers towards, if nothing else, then be a retailer in some product, helping them earn a profit with retail. All this is the government's initiative to again give a push to non-farm employment as well. Non-farm employment itself has its own pros and cons. The biggest pro is it is not dependent on factors which you don't have control over. Like the biggest problem with agriculture is those factors which are climate, which they don't have, or you don't have any control over them. If it's not raining, it's not raining. You might have heard about things such as cloud seeding, etc., but none of that has been successfully implemented on the ground. In most of the cases, you do not have control over it. Most of our farmlands in India are rain-fed. Rain-fed means they are dependent on rain as the primary source of irrigation. Very, very few farmlands are actually connected to canals or have proper irrigation infrastructure in place. With these alternate employment opportunities, at least it is free from distress. Also, that gives you much more or much better income security as compared to agriculture, because with agriculture, you don't know the cost at which a product will be sold. Yes, there is MSP. The problem with MSP is, number one, it is not for every crop. 22 crops plus sugarcane. It doesn't include fruits. So your cost or the price at which you are able to sell it is not fixed. The other part of the problem here also is that even when the government gives MSP, Food Corporation of India, due to various factors, is not able to procure everything under MSP in unlimited numbers. If you look at farmers from Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, the biggest problem they have is that FCI is not working well in our states. If you are a farmer in Punjab or Haryana, you have a much higher chance of being able to sell your produce to Food Corporation of India as compared to if you are a farmer in Odisha or West Bengal or Chhattisgarh. So again, these are factors which you don't have any control over. You might have worked very hard, you might have had the production of food grains, rice and wheat, but it still is not in your hands if it would be sold at a good price or not. It reduces poverty, helps you earn better income, develops your skill and encourages entrepreneurship as well. So it allows you to have more skills, expand your earning, allows you to have a different way in which you can earn money, not just dependent on agriculture. On the other hand, there are some cons attached to it. It's not that easy to get access, to get loans, as we discussed. It's still easier now to get access for agriculture loans. The government has done a lot about it. We discussed in the beginning of this chapter. Agriculture credit, loans for farming, etc. have now become easier. But with these kind of alternate employment opportunities, there is still a big gap between the demand for the credit and the availability of the credit. There's also a problem about inadequate infrastructure, the cold storage issue as I discussed. There are, apart from the cold storage thing, in the non-farming activities also, let's say if you're involved in handicraft, you require your tools, you require a place to sit, you require to sell it, you require the linkage to the market. There's limited market access, there are still gaps. Expecting that everyone who lives in the rural area would know a certain types of handicraft or have certain types of skill in their hand. That is not always true. That is not how it works. Not everyone would be able to have any skill apart from agriculture. Then low productivity is also a big issue. Without the use of machines, if you're asking people to work by hands only and produce stuff that has to be sold in the market, you can't always expect very high productivity. So it would not be worth their time. At the end of the day, if the farmer feels that if I would have invested so much time in my farming alone, I would have earned more money, then it defeats the entire purpose. You want the farmer to feel that yes, my money is or my time is better used here, my resources are better used here. If you have a situation where the farmer thinks that I am better, it's better for me to use my time in growing some more kgs of wheat, then it defeats the entire purpose. The other section, the last section of this chapter, where the government is focusing a lot on rural development, is sustainable development and organic farming. Let's look at sustainable development first. This is a very key phrase that countries around the world, including India, use very often. Sustainable development. Now, what do you mean by sustainable development? The simple idea is, if you are growing something today, if you are developing something today, is it coming at the cost of the future generation? Are you developing something from the point of view that let me grow something, I don't care how I leave the soil, I don't care how much water remains after I am done. Let's say your house only has 10 liters of water, you are the first one to take a bath. Would your point of view be, I am the first one, let me use all the water, I don't care what the others do? Or would your thinking be, I am the first one, there are 4 more people to go, let me use as little water as possible so that everyone can now have their own way? This is what sustainability is. When you're thinking from the long run perspective, thinking from the perspective of others as well who will come after you. In agriculture, for example, what it refers to is the practices that you involve, or the practices that you use in agriculture, extracting groundwater, using pesticides, using a lot of techniques which may give you better production right now, but which may decrease the quality of soil for later on or the next generation. This is what the government's focus is, that we can't be so short-sighted, we can't just think about short term. One of the ways in which the government tries to encourage this is called organic farming. Organic farming, as you know, is a technique of farming which uses minimal pesticide, minimal fertilizer, so that you are growing crops in as close to nature manner as possible. You would have seen this in the market. Today when you go and buy something from the market, let's say a fruit or a vegetable, let's say you go and buy a potato. Price of potato, let's say, will be 30 rupees per kg. And then there would be a company saying, buy this, this is organic potato, this is 50 rupees per kg. Organic products are usually sold at a higher price because they are telling you that we did not use anything that might harm your body in producing this. So if you buy our product, you might have to pay a slightly heavier or slightly bigger price, but you will be safer here. We have used more sustainable methods, we have used safer methods. Now it's easy to say this and it's easy to talk about this, but the fact is it's not that easy to actually put into practice. These are the core principles of organic farming. First, most important, soil fertility protection. As I said earlier, soil is the biggest friend for the farmer. And you are not a farmer who will just grow product once, you have to grow it year after year after year. So you have to maintain the productivity of soil. For example, monoculture or monocropping, growing the same crop year after year is usually discouraged. Why? Because you're extracting the same kind of mineral or nutrients from the soil time and time again, and you're not giving enough time for the soil to now recuperate or recover. That's why mixed farming, for example, is encouraged. Water conservation, again, very, very, very important. Because most of the agricultural areas in India are rain fed, so are dependent on rain. When it doesn't rain enough, the easiest option the farmers would have is to extract water, groundwater, and that becomes problematic. In most states in India, farmers don't have to pay for water bill, and in some states they don't even have to pay for electricity bill. The reason, or because of this, there is no limit on water extraction. There are so many reports that have pointed out that we are running out of water at an extremely fast pace. You would have seen a few months back what happened in Bengaluru, when there were news coming in from Bengaluru about shortage of water because it did not have enough rain. That is a big problem. Water conservation, the way to prevent water, is something that has to be looked into, and that is an integral part of organic farming. There's also the issue of biodiversity enhancement. Means, are you making sure that in other species also get a part of this environment, they are also able to sustain, or are you just using all the resources for yourself? Most importantly, carbon footprint reduction. Trying to ensure that your farming practices do not pollute the environment. The carbon emissions should be reduced as much as possible so that it is sustainable in the long run. All these are core principles of organic farming. And again, these are easy to speak about, easy to discuss, but for a farmer who is actually on the field, who is actually growing the crop, it's not that easy for them to deploy. Imagine a farmer seeing that there is a kind of a pest that is now ready to destroy their entire crop. How would you stop the farmer from using the pesticide? Just by telling him, no, don't use this, you have to be organic. No, for the farmer, the topmost priority will be to save his or her cultivation rather than focusing on just being organic. This is where it's very challenging. It's not that easy to expect that the farmers would actually deploy every resource available to them, because when it comes to making a choice, it's not that easy. In India, as of March 2024, the data that is available with us, about 17,64,000 hectares of organic farming land is being done or is being seen. India ranks 4th in terms of certified area globally. That means globally, how much area is under organic farming is certified by an international agency, whether it's called International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movement Statistics. They basically are the ones who tell how much area in a certain country is under organic farming. Amongst the states in India, Madhya Pradesh is the state which has the largest area under organic farming, followed by Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Gujarat, etc. The one state in India that had announced a few years back that we are 100% organic now, that is Sikkim. Sikkim is India's first fully organic state. They were able to do that because it's a relatively smaller state, obviously. When you deploy the same things on a much larger area, it becomes much more difficult for you. Sikkim was able to do that. It has around 75,000 hectares of agricultural land. India ranks first globally in terms of number of farmers practicing organic farming, because anyways we have one of the largest number of farmers in the world. So obviously the part of organic farming, or the farmers that are using organic farming or making use of organic farming practices, is also the largest in the entire world. Now, what exactly are the benefits that organic farming offers? As I said, the most basic one is the health benefit for the consumer. This is, as I told you a few years back, Sikkim, and again it's something that Sikkim announced a few years back. It keeps on coming in the news time and time again. They were able to do that because of the much smaller area that they have under cultivation. It's not fair to expect every state to do that immediately. In fact, on the contrary, there is a contrary case study to it. A few years back, if you remember, just after COVID-19, Sri Lanka faced a huge economic crisis. They had to go to IMF multiple times. They took loans from India, China, Japan, etc. There were multiple reasons why Sri Lanka was pushed towards this economic bankruptcy. COVID was one of them. There was terror issues, Easter bombing that had happened, because of which the tourists coming into Sri Lanka had reduced. But one other very big factor was the Sri Lankan president announced overnight that Sri Lanka will become a 100% organic farming country, because of which agricultural production in Sri Lanka just went down drastically, because this was not done in a planned manner. When you randomly decide that from tomorrow no pesticide, no fertilizer, you are not giving an option to the farmers to look for alternatives. If you don't have alternatives available for the farmers, how can you expect them just stop using any kind of chemical, any kind of fertilizer, and still maintain the same amount of output that they had earlier? They had shortage of food grains. They had to import food grains. Their export was destroyed. So these kind of things are good, desirable, should be done in the long run. But to expect that overnight a country or a state can turn into an organic state, that is not how it works, and that is not how it should work. And that is something that the world has learned from the example of Sri Lanka. Now, these are the benefits. First, environment benefits a lot from it. It has lesser pollution, soil degradation is lower, improved soil productivity. When the productivity of the soil improves, it also means biodiversity gets a push here. It is overall for the environment much better prospect as compared to others. For example, the pesticides or the fertilizer that is used, I'll give you a simple example. In India, the fertilizer subsidy that is given by the government is huge. If you look at the government subsidy bill, the largest government subsidy is a food subsidy, that is because of the National Food Security Act. Second, we have, after that we have fertilizer subsidy. The biggest fertilizer subsidy is for urea. The biggest component of urea is nitrogen. So urea is given by the government to the farmers at a much lower price in the market. The result is that because the farmers get urea at a much lower price, there is much more usage of urea than what should be the case. Like the three important components of farming in the soil are NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Now, if you look at this, the ratio should be 4:2:1. But because in India urea is so overused, because of this, what our soil has become for India, it has become 8:4:1. There is so much nitrogen in the gas because of overuse of urea, which again harms the environment in the long run. So organic farming, which would include lesser use of fertilizer, almost zero use of these fertilizer, would mean that the soil disbalance will also go away. So this is where it will be much more eco-friendly. Health benefits, it is in fact the reason why some people are ready to pay a higher price when they go to the market to buy a product that is termed as organic. Now, I don't know if those are really organic, if they are abiding by all the practices or not, but the fact is that when you go and buy a product in the market that is tagged as organic, obviously they are charging a higher price. And the reason is the assurance that they give you is it's better for your health, because you have seen so many of these news stories about pesticides left over on the fruits, pesticides left over on the vegetables. A lot of times because the farmers have to sell things in the market which have not even ripened. Chemicals are used for ripening the fruit so that they are ready to eat now. All these are issues that we have in orthodox farming which are neglected or which are rather gotten rid of when it comes to organic farming. So for the consumer in the end, it has better health benefits. In the long run, it will have economic benefits as well. As I said, economically, it makes sense because these products, organic ones, are sold at a higher price in the market than the orthodox ones. So if a normal potato is 20 rupees per kg, this will be sold at 45, 40, 35 rupees per kg. So in the long run, yes, it will require more effort from your side. You will have to find for alternatives, but it reduces the need to buy fertilizers, etc., pesticides. It also gets a better price in the market. So in the long run, it will be beneficial for you and for the government as well. A lot of times we just think from the perspective of the farmer, but think from the perspective of the government as well for a bit. As I told you, fertilizer subsidy is the second largest subsidy bill for the government, and most of it goes into urea subsidy. Now, if a lot more farmers adopt organic farming and they don't require fertilizers, the result will be that the government would not have to spend so much money in fertilizer subsidy. So the economic benefits are not just restricted to the end consumer who is buying it, the end customer who is buying it, but the economic benefits also include benefits for the government as well in such a scenario. Also, it is an integral part of sustainable agriculture. As I said, sustainable practices mean, are you just concerned about you and your generation, or are you leaving the earth, are you leaving your society, your land in a better place, thinking about the next generation as well for the coming years as well? Because these practices do not involve a lot of external effort, do not require you to change the nature of soil, do not require a lot of external intervention. That means it is much more sustainable in the long run. And this is how organic farming sets itself apart from the others. These are certain challenges in transitioning to organic farming. Again, it's not that easy. There is lower yield, so farmer would have to now see if not using pesticide or fertilizer, how will it actually impact. Most cases it might reduce the yield in the short run. Market access may not be very well available. You have to underline the fact it is organic, what market is available. As I said earlier, when you go to the market, are you looking for the cheapest product or are you looking for the organic product? In case of India, in such a price sensitive market, most people are still just looking for the cheapest product. When you go to the market, someone says this potato is double the price of others because it is organic. A lot of people will say, I don't want it. Give me the cheaper one. That's a big problem. There are policy barriers. There are still lack of policies when it comes to organic farming. There are some, I'll just show you some of the examples, but policy support still lacks. Higher cost, asking the farmers to transition into this requires a lot of cost that is involved to the farmers, and it has a shorter shelf life because again, use of a lot of these external agents is to increase the shelf life of these products. Make sure they don't go bad very quickly. So by using organic farming, you are actually reducing the shelf life, which might have a negative impact in the long run. So it has to be seen how the government is able to make organic farming more attractive for the farmers. It's not that the government is not doing anything. There are a few examples of the government trying to push organic farming. We have the national project on organic farming. It certifies those products which are organic in nature, so that when they go to the market, they can be sold at a higher price, they can demand a higher price. There is Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, again encourages organic farming. It gives certain financial assistance as well to the farmers who are looking for organic farming, so government is doing that bit. There is Mission Organic Value Chain as well, again promoting the farmer. This one is especially in the northeast part of the country, promoting the farmers into organic farming, seeing if that can improve their earning opportunities and reduce the expenses for the government as well by taking away that component of fertilizer subsidy. So it's a long thing, it's a long process, especially in a country like India where there is such a huge area that is under cultivation. There are so many farmers and there's so many government policies. You can't expect all of that to change overnight. It's a long process. It will require some time, but the government is deciding or has decided that this is where we want to go. And this brings us to the concluding part of chapter number 5 of class 11th economics NCERT. This was about rural development. We saw different aspects of rural economy. What is it that the government aims to achieve? Again, please understand, rural development is not just restricted to agriculture. Agriculture is a big part of it, but it goes way beyond agriculture alone. We'll see you next in chapter number 6. Don't forget to watch that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.